Welcome everyone to Mavenlink Academy's September webinar. Today's webinar is going to be on time and expenses. We wanted to welcome you and also thank those of you that were on the last month's webinar for your participation and all of the feedback that you provided us. Just as a heads up and some information, we did take all of that feedback into consideration, and we will be walking through time and expense approvals in-app as that was requested on the last webinar. I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and my co-presenter here. My name is Melissa Bonney. I am the Senior Director of Training and Corporate Account Management here at Mavenlink. I am one of Mavenlink's first employees, so I can say with a very strong degree of confidence here that I'm extremely excited to be presenting not only time and expense approvals to you, but some of the upcoming features that we will be releasing in the future as well. I have a background in education and a background in psychology as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Laura Fryer and I am also going to be presenting today. I am a trainer and corporate accounts manager here at Mavenlink. I went to school at Loyola Marymount University and I studied both business and psychology.
Before we begin today, we wanted to share with you a little bit about Mavenlink's vision and our mission. So our mission here at Mavenlink is really to reinvent the way that the world conducts business. And I believe you can see that in the features that we've been releasing, as well as Mavenlink's product as a whole. So we're providing technology, expertise, and support that will enable any organization to succeed in today's global and connected economy.
We do know you'll have questions throughout today's webinar, and we do encourage you to ask those questions through your chat feature. It's over on the left-hand side of your Ready Talk window. So please direct your questions for us over there. We are going to collect those and answer them in the last 10 minutes of the webinar today. I do want to ask you to limit those to time and expense approvals. This is going to help us out a ton so we don't have to filter through other requests or anything, so it'll really help us to answer as many questions as we can. If you do have other feature requests, questions on other features, etc., I do want to encourage you to direct those over to support@mavenlink.com or use our live chat feature to ask those kinds of questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. So time and expense approvals, what are some of the benefits and why should you activate time and expense approvals within your organization? Well, once you activate time and expense approvals, it's going to go through an approval workflow. So this also is going to increase oversight within your company and accountability with those individual contributors for their day-to-day work. You will have the confidence of knowing that only the information that has been approved, double-checked, and looked at and reviewed will appear as available to add to an invoice, or if you have our QuickBooks integration, to be sent over to QuickBooks. So this is going to help optimize your billing process. It's also going to increase and strengthen the internal communication. As you have approvals and rejections of the time and expenses, you can communicate to your team what they need to edit, what they need to modify to submit a timesheet or an expense report that's going to be approved. You can also have annotated comments on approvals as well, so you can let them know what they're doing well as well. Now, time and expense approvals is a Mavenlink Premier feature. So if you are interested in learning more about Mavenlink Premier, you can email us at sales@mavenlink.com. Now, once time and approval has been activated on your account and the time has been approved, it's going to be locked. So you will know that that time cannot be edited by those individual users. Once it has been approved, it will be unable to be modified. Now, before we walk in app, I wanted to just give you a brief approval process flow of what time submission will look like. So your individual contributors are going to be able to continue to log their time in the way that they normally would within Mavenlink. So if you prefer to use our timer, you certainly can do that. You can also go into the time and expenses tab within your Mavenlink projects, or you can jump straight into your timesheet and start logging your time from there. Now, those participants will need to submit their timesheets through the timesheet section. They would review all of their unsubmitted time, and then once they've reviewed it, they have a button to submit those timesheets for approval. When they submit that timesheet for approval, what will happen is individuals in those projects that they have time that they're submitting will receive in their activity feed, if you're a financial user and above, a request to approve that timesheet. So you're going to see in that activity feed that there are some pending time approvals in which you can review and either accept them with comments, or you can also reject those with comments as well. That individual user will then receive the communication that that timesheet has been approved, it's good to go, or it needs to have some editing done and maybe resubmit that.
The expense report submission and approval process is very similar to the time submission and approval process Mel just walked through. The main difference I want to point out is with the expenses, you have to send in an expense report. So you still log an expense like you normally would. Same thing with the time. You log a time entry like you normally would, and then you'd submit your timesheet. For expenses, you're going to submit an expense report for that individual project. So you're going to log your expense. You're going to create an expense report for that project. You're then going to submit your expense report, which goes to your project manager to go in and review. So they will review your expense report, all the expenses that are on that, and then they would go in and approve or reject your report. And same idea, they can still give comments with both the approval and rejection. Right now, your approvals and rejections happen in your activity feed of each project. Last webinar, we got a lot of questions on what should we expect to see in the future, what's to come. So we did want to give you a little insight into what you can expect to see with time and expense approvals. The first thing here is the ability to approve and reject within the timesheet and expense report pages. So you'd have the ability to do that in those two options as well as in the activity feed. And then you're also going to see an administrative dashboard in the future. So it's kind of a centralized place for you to see all unsubmitted time and expenses for a given period for each individual user. So our developers are hard at work on this, and you should expect to see it in the near future.
Thank you. I'm excited to look at those enhancements in the future. All right, so without further ado, let's see time and expense approvals in action within Mavenlink. So when you are activating your time and expense approvals within Mavenlink, there's a couple of ways to do so. One of those ways is through your admin settings. So you would need to be an administrator within your Mavenlink account. You'll know if you are, if you have account underneath your name here. You can also go to your settings and go to account from there. So I'm just going to jump into our account settings real quickly. Right underneath the project access, so you're going to scroll down a smidge, you will see time and expense approvals. So you can click to require time or expense approvals independently, or you can use them in conjunction with each other. What you are making a decision about when you select these is that going forward, any user in your Mavenlink account that is creating a project, it will default to have time and expense approvals on. So make sure to make your decision and then click Save. Again, when somebody creates a new project, what will happen is it will have require time approvals as pre-selected to yes, or require expense approvals as pre-selected to yes. Now don't fret if you have some active projects you're already working and you really want to activate time and expense approvals. I can show you how to do that. You must be an administrator or lead within the project, which is different than being an administrator at the account level. You will go over to your Manage Gear button over on the right-hand side and click into Project Settings. Now you will need to scroll down towards the very, very bottom of your screen here, and there will be a Require Time Approvals and Require Expense Approvals, very similar to at the admin level. Now you'll notice that when I select Require Time Approvals, it's going to ask me if I would like to automatically approve all of the time entries that happened before this date. If I choose to select that, what that does is it approves them. I can now use those time entries or those expense reports and items and add them onto invoices. Or again, if I have that QuickBooks integration, I can send them over into QuickBooks. If I choose not to automatically approve them, what that means is my individual contributors will then need to submit their timesheets for approval as well as their expenses, and then I can send them onto an invoice. All right, I actually have a project that I've been working with Laura and a couple of team members, so we're going to see if we can get some of these timesheets approved. Now, since I do have a client in this particular workspace and I want to have a brief sidebar conversation here, I am going to make this message private, so I went to all of my team here in the Mavenlink Academy team, and I'm going to also call out specifically my users. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm not exactly sure what email notification preferences that they have set, so I'll just ask them to please submit their time and expenses. And we'll just add a little bit of personality in there. All right, so now while we're waiting for people to submit their time and expenses, I did want to show you what it looks like. So you'll notice that Christian has already submitted his timesheet previously. So you'll notice that I can also click here. It's a hyperlink. It'll bring me into that specific timesheet. It tells me how many hours he worked for that week, what days he worked. At this point, I think this looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and approve. Now you'll notice I can approve, and I can type in a message if I'd like to communicate something to him. In this case, I'm just going to say it looks good, and I'm going to select OK. It's going to update my activity feed to let me know that I'm the one who approved that and on the date that I approved that.
All right, and I just got the email notification saying from Mel's post saying, please submit my time from last week. So I am going to show you that idea here. All right. So here I am. I'm on my timesheet from last week. And I'm going to go in and basically log my time in my timesheet here for my Sure Thing project. I'm going to select my task. I worked on scripting last week, and I'm going to put in 3 hours on Thursday and 4 hours on Friday that I worked, and I'm going to submit those for approval. Before I do, I wanted to show you this unsubmitted number here. This 10 hours is calculating the hours that need to be submitted for approval. So it is only calculating those hours from projects that require time approval. So for instance, this Animal Society project does not require time approvals, so it is not adding in those 4 hours here. So you can see it's just these 10 hours here. Lazy Horse Ranch requires approvals, and so does my Sure Thing project. That's where this unsubmitted 10 hours is populating from. So I am going to submit this for approval. And those are now going through and going into being submitted to Mel for approval. So right now I have my check marks here that show me what looks good. So these are already approved time entries. They are saying that's the annotated comments with it that says it looks good. And then you can see here I also have this sent envelope here that shows that it is sent. And I am going to see here if I have been approved or denied. Jump back to last week. And it looks like my Sure Thing has been approved here. And I can see that it says, fantastic work, Laura, thank you. So I see Mel's comments. I did want to show you a rejected one. That was this Lazy Horse Ranch project earlier. It showed a little red exclamation mark, and it had some notes there as well. That means that timesheet was rejected. It also had the ability to go in and add my hours for that time for that week. So I did have editing capabilities for a rejected timesheet. You can see now those that are sent, I do not have the ability to go in and edit it. If I rejected this, or not rejected, if I canceled this submission here, I could go in and make my changes if I wanted to cancel that. I could go in and edit it from there. All right, so now I also wanted to show you the expense submission process. So we've gone through the time submission process. Let's now take a look at expenses. So I am going to jump over to my expenses tab here. I do have some expenses logged for my Sure Thing project already. So I had taken my client, we went on a client meeting. My client wanted Italian food. So I decided a trip to Italy would probably be the best idea there. So I have some lodging, I have some mileage, and I have some food expenses logged for this project. So I'm going to go in and create an expense report here. So new expense report. I then here select my project. So I'm going to go in and say my Sure Thing project. In that drop-down of what projects populated there, they need two things. So one, they need to be projects that require expense approvals, and two, they need to also have expenses logged against them in order to create an expense report. So those are the 4 projects that you saw in my drop-down here, were those that need expense approvals as well as have expenses logged against them. I do need to put in a report name. That is a requirement. So I'm going to say trip to Italy. Client wanted Italian food. I can put in any notes here if I want to. And then I just go in and simply select the expenses that I want to put on this expense report. So you can see I have a big number, but I'm going to see if I can get by with getting that money back for this project. So I'm going to go in, create and submit for approval, and it's going to drop me back into my expense reports page. This is showing me all of my expense reports that have been submitted. So I can see my expense report name. I can go in and click into those as well. Project name that expense report was submitted for, the date it was submitted, the team member. I've done all the expense reports. And then the amount here as well as the status. So I have some that are pending, I have some that are rejected, and some that are approved. So while we're waiting for that to come through, let's see if we can see if my expense report has been approved or denied yet. Looks like my trip to Italy is still pending, and now it's rejected. So you can now see that because it is rejected, and I haven't taken a look at it yet, I can click into this rejected, and I get the red flag. My report was not approved. It says trip to Italy. There is a great Italian restaurant down the street. Resubmit and just for the food. Airfare and hotel are denied. Bummer. So
try though. Try.
Looks like I'm out a little amount of money here. So I am going to resubmit only for my food because that's the only thing that's approved. And I can say sorry, but it was a great trip. And I can create and submit for approval. So now I just have my food on this resubmittal of my expense report. And you can see here I have my initial one that was rejected, and then my resubmittal here that is still pending.
All right, so we're going to actually go in and take a look since this is a more reasonable expense report here. Although I would love to go to Italy as well, that is not something that I think that we will approve here at this time. So I'll go ahead and approve this comment here. This is much better and a lot more realistic. So we'll go ahead and approve that one. Now that I have some time entries and some expenses that have been approved, I can now invoice. For my customer if I choose to do so. So since I'm already in the project, I'm just going to click on that payment tab here, and I'm going to create an invoice. Now I can certainly create an invoice by going over to the create a new invoice over here. This just automatically puts that project already selected, and I can set some details. I can also do some formatting. But for purposes of this invoice, I'm just going to just select some time entries. I don't really need to select that expense right there. So I'm going to select that time entry. All of the time entries for Laura and team, and I can see that this looks good. I'm going to go ahead and send this invoice off to my client. Now since he's in Mavenlink, he's going to be prompted already to pay that, so we can just go ahead and wait for payment in that respect. Now remember, time and expense approvals, once you activate that, you can activate it at your admin settings, so you can do that for future projects. You can change any existing projects by going over to that manage project settings from here. And then that will allow you to take any existing projects and turn them into requiring time and expense approvals. You don't need to work them together. You can use them independently if you just wanted to have expenses on there or you just wanted to have time. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn over to you guys, and we're going to take a look at some of the questions that you've asked. We've seen a number of questions that have come in, and so we'll start taking a look at those. So I have one here, Laura, from Janelle. Is there an admin setting that we can use to require approvals on all projects rather than project by project?
Yeah, so Mel covered that at the beginning. That is a default setting on your account level. So you would go in to your account settings and require time and expense approval. And that is, again, as a default setting, so anytime somebody on your account goes to create a new project, they will see that default, and they can override it at the project level when they do create a project. So it's not a complete requirement on your account, it's just setting default settings there, Janelle.
Great, thank you. So I have another one from Danielle. What if you have more hours to add after the time has been approved? All right, so if you have more hours to add after the time has been approved, you can submit additional time entries. If the time has already been approved, it's good to go and it's able to be sent over onto an invoice. So you can add more project-related information through your timesheet. There is an option that's going to be released shortly that will allow you to cancel approved time and then edit it and resubmit. So look forward to that coming soon.
It looks like Jen has a question here saying, can you change the approver so it could be either the internal approver or your client? Jen, to address your question, those users that can approve time and expenses are anyone with financial access in that project. So if they are a financial user, an admin, or a project lead, they can approve them. Your client cannot approve time and expenses. They don't have access to your time and expenses, so they cannot approve. That would be more of at the invoice level where they can kind of shoot back to you, hey, this isn't approved time or expenses, and kind of shoot that back to you at that point in time. But right now the approval process happens with anyone with financial access in that project. So like I said, a financial user, an admin, or a project lead.
Janelle has another question. After time has been approved, are employees prevented from editing the time previously approved? Janelle, yes, that is correct. Once it's been approved, they are unable to edit that time.
Okay, let's see.
All right, I have another question here. It looks from Chris. I've set my email notifications to relevant to me. Will I still receive a notification that there are time and expense entries to approve? The answer to that question is yes. You will get an email notification every time a resource submits a timesheet for a project that you have financial access on. So again, the threshold is if you are in a project, you have financial access and above, meaning you are either financial access, lead, or admin of that project, you will see in your activity feed and an email notification will be sent to you to approve. Yep. And then as Laura was saying, we will shortly be having the ability to approve within your timesheet. If you're aware, when you're in a timesheet, you can change your perspective to another person so you can approve their timesheets from there soon. We will also have an admin dashboard that's going to be coming in the future as well.
Yeah. So I just saw another question come through from Leah. Her question here is, I don't have Mavenlink Premier. Can I still turn on time and expense approvals, or do I have to upgrade? This is time and expense approvals are with our Premier version. So logging time and expenses starts with the Premier option, and then turning on time and expense approvals is only available to you if you are a Premier user, Leah. So yes, to answer your question, you do have to be a Premier user.
I have a question from Vanessa. It says, do clients have to be Mavenlink users to receive or pay invoices? No clients, well, they do have to come into Mavenlink, so you do have to invite them into the project with you. They don't have to pay to be a Mavenlink user if they're a client in your project. And then you would send them the Mavenlink invoice, they will receive that, and then they could pay that through either PayPal if they wanted to pay through PayPal, and then it will automatically update your project. Or if you take payment outside of PayPal, then you would then just update the payment received. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Looks like I have another one here from Jan. She said, I entered my time in the timesheet, but I don't have the option to submit it. Basically asking why, I think there. Jan, to answer your question, I would check to make sure that your time approvals have been activated for that project. Usually that happens because you do not require time approvals for that project. That's the reason you're not getting that submit for approval button in your timesheet. So double check that, and that's usually the reason there.
All right, let's take a look. Can I attach a receipt to an expense line item? Yes, in Mavenlink, when you are logging expenses, you can attach a receipt. So if you've scanned one into your computer, you can attach that. My actual preference when I am logging expenses here within Mavenlink is that I use my mobile app. So I just simply take a picture of that receipt. That way, if I lose that receipt in transit, it's not such a big deal. It's already loaded into my project. If I need to reprint it later, I certainly can do so. So absolutely, you can add a receipt into your, when you log your expenses within Mavenlink.
Let's see, I have another question from Billy, it looks like. He said, can I approve my own timesheet? Billy, to answer your question, yes, you can approve your own time if you have financial access on the project. So again, that goes back to what kind of access you have at the project level. So if you're a financial user, an admin, or a project lead on the project, you do have the ability to approve your own time. You don't have the ability to reject your own time. It would be more of a cancellation of your submission. You'd be able to go in, make those changes, and resubmit it. So yes, to answer your question, you can submit, or you can approve your own time.
All right, so we have another question. Can I see unapproved time and expenses in my time and expenses analytics? So we do have analytic reports, and they're time tracking reports and expense reports within our analytics section. Those will let you see any expenses or any time entries that have been logged, regardless of whether or not time or expense approvals are on. So you can certainly run reports through that manner and take a look at all of those time submissions and the expense submissions. So if you need to have, if you have clients that have detailed requests where they need to see each line by line item, you can certainly export those to either CSV or Excel, or you can print them to PDF and present those to your clients as well. All right, it sounds great. Thank you so much for all of your questions. If we didn't get to your question, we'll certainly follow up after, and we can use some of these for our knowledge base, so please feel free to go to our knowledge base as well so that you can see some answers to all of these great questions. Thank you again for joining us on Mavenlink's webinar on time and expense approvals, and we look forward to seeing you in Mavenlink soon.
Yes, thank you everyone.